Okay. I told you I wouldn't take long. So, so we're going to talk about a different type of paranormal experience altogether. Um, Most of what we think about when we think about a ghost story or a haunting is we think about somebody that has died, crossed over, and they're coming back in some way. And of course, we just talked about in residual hauntings that um, that they don't need to come back necessarily to leave something kind of paranormal, spooky behind. But this is something else entirely because we don't believe shadow people are created by, I don't know, people that have passed away or people that have ever lived on this earth. So right away you're probably thinking demons, which makes sense because demons are also entities that have never lived on this earth but still making their presence known. If you believe in demons, I honestly don't know enough about them that I'm not even going to comment on the whole demon thing, which is the most in vogue paranormal topic today, up there with portals. But anyway, so a shadow person. Let's just talk about how are they observed? What do they look like? A shadow person or a shadow figure. Um, Usually, you will see them in your room, in your bedroom, which is awesome. They they are frequently spotted as you are going to sleep or maybe waking up. Um, they're just standing in a corner of the room observing you. They're watching you sleep. Yes, it's it's sweet dreams. I love. I'm telling the story at nearly 11 at night, 11 p.m. local time. I realize I might need to plug in soon. Um, so hold on, let me do this unprofessionally as possible right now, real quick. I knew there was something I was going to do in between videos. Anyway, so they are solid black. They're opaque. They're unlike when you usually think of a ghost that they're kind of see-throughish. A shadow person is completely opaque. You cannot see through them sometimes, but even though you're seeing it in the dark, you can kind of usually see around the room. But sometimes there's something that's blacker than black or darker than dark, and this is a shadow person. Sometimes they have this outline around them that is almost looks like a thin line of static, like static electricity, like you're watching a TV and it's on static. There's a thin line that kind of provides their very defined outline. And some people have observed that they seem to be wearing a hat. So they'll see the brim of a hat, which is unique. And people have different theories about what exactly that is. So for the most part, for a long time, people have been seeing shadow people. And it's just this kind of like startling moment in your sleep or as you get out of sleep. Now, we should also separate old hag syndrome and the idea of the like a succubus, incubus idea where you are stuck in bed, you're paralyzed, you can't breathe. And sometimes people have these visions of bizarre things, including maybe somebody sitting on their chest. Now, this, as scary as it is, and I have not had the visual hallucination with it, but I've definitely experienced that feeling. It's usually connected huge to stress, and it always has with me personally. But it really, in a big way as well, happens to do with just the very basics of human biology. What happens to us when we sleep? What chemicals are being released, and what are they doing? So we are when we sleep, there is a paralyzing drug that is released from the brain that kind of shuts down the motor functions of the body. Otherwise, we would be acting out our dreams. We'd be physically moving like crazy. So obviously, some people still do move a lot, but not to the extent that we would if we were acting out our dream in full. For the most part, there are definitely exceptions to that. Yeah, I was trying to remember. Uh, there's a movie called Sleepwalk with Me starring Mike Birbiglia where he writes about he's got a condition where that chemical is not released within him, and so he'll actually get up and be acting out huge scary dreams. And one time even like trying to throw a dresser across the room because in his mind this is what was going on in his dream, so his body was acting it out. He doesn't have that chemical that gets released. So that's the worst that can happen. So what happens also is when you're asleep, any of you that use any of the sleep tracking functions of your watch, you'll see that your heart rate really decreases. You have to take much smaller breaths. It just doesn't. Your body's not doing nearly as much. It's very much in a conservation and a recovery mode when you're sleeping. So sometimes something goes wrong and you end up waking up so your eyes can open. But depending on what's going on, how you're sleeping, how your neck might be pinching and messing up the function of how this chemical is being released, that chemical might continue to be released through your body. So you are now conscious, you're awake, but you physically are paralyzed, and it is scary. Um, you can't talk normally. You can make sounds with your mouth, but you can't, you're just not you. And that can be terrifying. And also, your body is still taking those really shallow, small breaths. Now, you start to experience this. Your first thing is kind of shock and fright. So you want to take a big breath and scream, but you can't. And so that inability to take that breath kind of fakes you out and making you feel like there's pressure on your chest, that there's maybe someone sitting on your chest. So this is the skeptical answer to shadow people. And everything that was said right there is all stuff that really does happen, and it's not paranormal. However, and sometimes there are visual hallucinations that are just kind of your dream world still kind of playing out in front of your eyes, in front of your mind at least. You think you're seeing these things. So that is real. That happens. And for the most part, people that have these scary moments, they wonder what this is, and that's what it is. It's actually not that scary. I mean, it is scary in the moment, but it's not a frightening paranormal thing. However, there are also shadow people. These are two separate entities entirely. Um, I had my own experience one time, and only one time, with a shadow person, and it was similar. I was with someone. We were watching a movie, and I zonked out. I fell asleep. The person that was watching the movie with me didn't notice I fell asleep, and so started to talk to me, I guess, about something in the movie. And so when that happened, it woke me up, and I looked over at her, and there was a 6 foot tall shadow figure standing between her and the television. So I could not see through it to the TV, but I could see her no problem. So she was definitely, it was on the other side of her, and it was standing up there looking down at her. And I instantly stood up. I said, "Something's here." And in less than a second, I mean, in probably a quarter of a second, the thing faded away into nothingness. It happened so fast, I couldn't be scared. It was just kind of startling. Somebody else is in the room. So I said, "Something's here," or "Someone's here." It wasn't even like, "Oh, there's a ghost." But someone's here. Um, and it was at that point that I kind of realized that as I was laying there before falling asleep, I felt what seemed like a hand brush down my leg, starting at my knee. So this is my knee, and brush all the way down towards my ankle, past my foot. Now I thought maybe there was a blanket at the foot of the bed, and just gravity pulled it off, and that's what I felt. But of course, at that point, I got up and I looked, and there was no blanket. So I felt a physical. It felt like a hand just rushing or brushing down my leg. Um, Something that's very interesting to note about shadow figures is that they are usually attached and associated with super negative places. We are talking about asylums, talking about old condemned prisons, that kind of thing. A place that is just filled with negative energy and emotion. And people see shadow people at these types of places way more frequently than anywhere else. Now, I was at my parents' house. I was visiting home. What's so negative there? Well, nothing at all about that space. However, the person that I saw this shadow figure looming over, looking down on, she herself was going through an incredibly negative and trying challenge in her life. So I believe, and that could not have been reassuring to hear as she's going through this other stuff. Oh, now there's this dark entity that is literally staring her down. Um, I had some really unique. I feel I went off track just a little bit there. I think I had something else to say. Maybe I'll be able to circle back to it. But I had some incredible stories come to me when I was giving my LA Hauntings tour. Um, just stuff I'd never heard of before, because we've always heard that a shadow figure is silently observing. And I can touch on the idea, the theory, which Stephen Hawking even talked about at one point, that we have multiple dimensions, and this is some interdimensional bleed through, Whether it's intentional or not is up for debate. But these are perhaps they're people just like you and me. And we are somehow just kind of overlapping their dimension and we're seeing them a little bit. Or maybe they're seeing us. Maybe they're not. Maybe we're haunting them the same way they're haunting us. Um, but I like Stephen Hawking. He said the idea that interdimensional travelers might come around here, that might make their presence known to us. He said it was more of a matter of time as opposed to something fantastical. It was just something that was bound to happen in time anyway. So I love his laissez-faire attitude about it, which is not settling. So anyway, we've always observed these guys observing us and then fading away, just like I experienced. And at that time, I'd never, I guess I knew about shadow figures. Oh, and I was going to say, when they're captured on camera, when investigators find them, they're usually moving exceptionally fast. Like their pace looks like, or their gait looks like they're walking, just like you and I would be walking, except it is sped up 8 times, something like that. So they're just cruising around. That's also a fascinating thing. Time maybe not lining up the way we perceive it, or how they perceive it, or how they are represented in our kind of a timeline. All fascinating, bizarre stuff. And we're only going to get weirder as this night goes on. Um, so I am giving a tour, and I was giving a private tour. It was just a boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife. I'm not sure. And the girl seems really into it, and the guy, he's very positive. He's very nice, but you could tell he's not a ghost story guy. So, but he's humoring his bride, and they're having a good night. So he's not a jerk about it, but you can he would crack a joke here or there, small, but obviously not into it. And at one point in the tour, I pull over, and we're still in the vehicle, but off the side of the road, I'm pointing out a place where actually Bugsy Siegel killed his best friend. And kind of in this, he took this moment kind of between my entire, driving around and giving my constant 3-hour spiel. And he started asking me about shadow people. And I told him my story, and I was actually very guarded about it because I wasn't sure if he was just going to be looking for an opening to shrug it off or make a joke or something. And then he opened up and he said that he's experienced something. So I'm still defensive about him. I'm not sure if he's trying to pull my leg or see how far I can go to believe something. But he talks about how he would have a shadow figure that would appear in his room, and it would get physical with him. It would physically confront him. They would fight. They would actually fight. And I'm not going to spoil anything here, but I do want to say that this guy earned my trust. I could tell as he was telling it that he was getting a bit more shaken up as he was talking about it. And we connected by all means. We had a great rest of the night. So I completely trust this person and this story. Although it was so fantastical and it was something I'd never, ever, ever, ever heard before. And he said he would get bear hugged from behind by this thing, that his hands and arms would be kind of pressed up against his body, and he couldn't get free, but he was like physically restrained. And I asked him, like, well, how do you know? Like, what did it look like? And he said he would, and this is interesting too, because I've never heard about this before, but he said he remembers at one point seeing, he had a window with a street light outside of it, shining light in and onto him and this attacker. And then he could look to the left at his closet with the doors closed, and he would see the outline of both people. So this thing was casting a shadow while being a shadow person. It was also casting a shadow. And he said eventually one time he got his arm out and he was able to elbow the thing. And I said, okay, well, what do you mean when you elbowed it? Did your arm just fly through open space? He's like, no, it was contact. It was a thud, like I hit a body. And I said, oh my gosh, this is, wow. Okay. So and this had happened a couple of times for this guy. So when did it end? Because you were overpowered, you were fighting back, but you were overpowered. How did you get out of it? What happened? He said, eventually I realized I couldn't win, and then it left. That is chilling. That is absolutely chilling. And even more incredible, very shortly after that, I was giving another private tour, and I had somebody talk to me. He was stationed on a he was Navy. He was stationed on a battleship, and this battleship had shadow people on it as well. And he had a very similar encounter where he was being attacked, and the only it and he was being beaten in a fight, in a physical fight, and it didn't go away until he realized that he's lost. He cannot beat this thing, and that's when it left. So how incredible is that? And how chilling is it that this entity, which forever has just been this passive observer, it's now getting physical with people. And it's not just getting physical, but it's passing a message along, which is that you're going to lose this fight. Uh, I don't know what to make of it. And I've heard some theories that these are different stages of an invasion, which makes it even worse. But the first stage is just to observe, just to take in who their future enemy is going to be, and then maybe to test the waters a little bit. And maybe that's what stage we're in now. What is the ultimate goal? We have no idea. Um, but yes, so there we go. Here's a really great couple of ghost stories for you right before bed, or shadow people stories, interdimensional travelers. Incredible, incredible stories. And it's also incredible because a phenomena is supposed to just be a phenomena, right? Like a ghost light is a ghost light. It's a light that appears and flashes and moves around and disappears eventually. A residual haunting is going to keep happening the same way it's always happened and just kind of go on its own replay. If you have a visitation haunting and a loved one comes back and makes their presence known, you might smell typical cigarette smoke or their cigar smoke or their perfume or something, and then it'll go away, and then eventually you'll smell it again. It'll come back. Somebody will make their presence known to you again. This is such a unique thing because it's a paranormal phenomenon that's evolving, and this is something that I very much want to keep an eye on, and hopefully not encounter again. I am all for really hair-raising, scary things, but I don't think I want to wake up in the middle of the night in a fight with a shadow person. Or I guess maybe I'll know right away, like, yes, you win. I get it. And that should make it a short one. I'm going to take a slightly longer break to wet my whistle a little bit as I'm a little bit talked out. But we're coming right back with another more and more unusual type of haunting. And this one has to do with, can we, you and I, human beings, maybe we can pool our mental resources and create a haunting. Whether we're doing it on purpose or not, well, we'll see. But we'll be back with the letter T, talking about tulpas.